Hi, this first screencast will introduce you to the way I teach, or the way I intend to teach. And the methodology I use is called team-based learning. And I guess it's not really my teaching as much as managing students' learning process. And the reason I've embraced this pedagogy is because I have read a lot on learning theory, and there's some striking results from that theory that informs my teaching. One of the results of empirical research into teaching and learning is that the traditional model where the professor talks at students is just super ineffective. It's, at best, I think a really good lecturer can motivate an interest in students and can motivate students to go do the work necessary to learn, but that's about it. It's not a particularly good model for conveying information or skills that you expect students to retain. So that's a pretty striking body of literature that illustrates that point, and it's quite convincing. So what does work? What seems to work much better as far as class time is to engage students in doing something related to the concepts that you're asking them to acquire. And so the pedagogy called team-based learning that I use is among many different possible strategies for active learning is the most tried and true, and I think the most logically consistent, coherent way of teaching that I've come across. And so that's why I've embraced it, and I'm converted all my classes to this way of doing things. I continually get better, and this will be my first opportunity to bring this methodology to an online class. I'm very interested and curious to see how that's going to work. Then the other reasons for this pedagogy stem from my training as an economist. Economic theory, microeconomics in particular, which is my broad area of specialization, suggests that people respond to incentives. In fact, a great popular press book on economics that's called The Armchair Economist by a guy named Steve Landsberg. He's way too conservative for my taste politically, but he's a very good writer and has a lot of insight. Anyway, his book starts, people respond to incentives, the rest is commentary. And by that he meant to summarize all of microeconomics. And it's pretty good summary. If I'm going to sit there talking at you, or stand up talking at you for 2 hours of our class time, which is very, very little class time together, really what incentive does a student have to do the reading, do the preparation for class? Sometimes it's reading, sometimes it's screencast, sometimes it's both. But if you're just going to sit there and listen, you know and I know that you don't have to read, and I've been a student in lecture classes, and I was probably a better student than most, and sometimes I did the reading, but there really isn't much incentive, there isn't much negative consequence if you don't do the reading, and there's not much positive consequence if you do. I guess, you learn it a little bit better if you do, but there's a lot of important things to do, and students, in my experience, my personal experience, and then in watching other students, you need a little bit more compelling incentive to actually prep for the learning activities, and TBL accomplishes that in a way that I'll talk about more in a moment. And then finally, by way of rationale, we just have a very scarce time together, and that's always true of any class, but in this format where we're going to meet 2 hours a week, but every week is really 2 weeks of semester class time, we are not together very long, and for me to use that time to talk at you when you are just sitting there passive and you could watch a screencast or whatever, that just seems a really poor use of time. So when the times we are together, I'm gonna try to arrange activities and learning activities that require us to be together, and where being together is actually a great benefit to learning the material, and that basically means students explaining concepts to other students, and it seems like, oh, okay, the best student in the team is going to really learn, is going to really help everybody else learn, but it's actually meant to be every single person takes an equal turn talking, and it's the person talking that's really figuring it out, and that's where the big learning comes from. So what are the mechanics of TBL? Let me talk a little bit about that. The way TBL works is that, first off, students do their preparation before class on their own. And again, sometimes there's a lot of reading, and I want you to do it carefully. Sometimes there's a screencast or two, or sometimes even three. I try to shoot for 5 to 10 minutes. I'm already at 6 minutes on this one, so we'll see if I can bring it home in a timely fashion. Anyway, the first phase of class is what I call the readiness assurance process, and I call it the readiness assurance process quiz, the readiness assurance process mini lecture, etc. Anyway, after students have prepped out of class, actually I have you take an online quiz that is this individual readiness assurance process quiz. I have you do that online just because class time is so short. Anyway, what I then do in class, let's change the color for in-class work. What I have you do in class is first off take this team test, and you'll take the same quiz, but now you'll be able to talk to one another about why this answer is better than that, and hopefully sometimes you'll argue about which one is the better one. In a traditional TBL class, students have a chance after that team wrap and before the professor's really said anything to write written appeals. If you think a question has 2 right answers or no right answers or draws on material you can't reasonably be expected to know, you can write up an appeal. And I'm going to take that out of class just because when we're just meeting for 2 hours, we've got to be careful about that. So I'm going to change that to black, meaning if a team, it has to be a team, really has a problem with one of the questions, you write up a justification of why that question has a problem, sign off on it as a team, not an individual, and then submit that. And if I agree with you, I'll give you the points of the missed question. If the team has to have missed the question to get those points, then I'll give you a bonus point just for writing a good challenge. And then very, 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 very sparingly in this 2 hours, having trouble, very sparingly, I will maybe say a few words about a murky idea here and there. What I'm going to try to do is anticipate some of the issues beforehand and put up screencasts, not on the material in the reading. I really want you to grapple with the reading and do your best to understand the reading, not take a shortcut by looking at the screencast. But if I see the reading draws on important material from the Principles of Economics class that for most teachers using this book would be a prerequisite, I'll put up a screencast. Then if there's questions, I will address those questions in class, but if it becomes very, very time consuming to do that, I will say, hey, you know what, I'll put up a screencast. So we'll do a mixture of in sparing in class, clarifying lectures, and then I'll use screencasts out of class, following class and prior to class. And then finally, what I hope is the bulk of class time, I'm shooting for shorter quizzes and a half hour to 45 minutes readiness assurance process. Then the rest of class time I'm going to spend directing you in a series of application exercises. Each one fairly short and sequenced carefully to go from straightforward applications to a little bit harder to a little bit harder. And the way TBL works is to try to get these application exercises to hit the 4 S's. And I'm at 10 minutes, so I'm going to have to cut this short, but I'll explain the 4 S's, and then you'll just see the first class on Tuesday, how this is going to work. The application exercises should be significant. So there's some real issue at hand, some compelling reason to be talking and thinking about what is going on. Teams will work on the same problem, so I'm not going to divide and conquer. I'm going to have all teams working on the same problem because you'll see why in just a second. The application exercise I'm going to have, students are going to have to come to a consensus on a single choice. Sometimes that's just a multiple choice option. Sometimes it's a single number. Sometimes you'll see as we go. And then finally, and most importantly, I have all teams report their answer at the same time. So simultaneous reporting. And then what I have you do is I've actually obtained an app that randomizes, and I can pick a student in a group. And what I'll do is just randomly pick a random student of a random group and have that student explain their team's answer, and not so much the answer, we'll have seen that altogether, but explain the rationale for the answer. And then I'll have other teams critique that rationale. We'll have a little bit of a conversation about what the proper methodology ought to be. And then I'll, as necessary, I'll fill any holes that have been left by the students. It's amazing, though. Students generally are spot on and really capture the essence of most of these issues. And we'll just see how that goes. Just one word about how I create teams, and then we'll stop. I'm going to make the teams. I may just use a randomizer. I think I'll try to distribute strengths and weaknesses across all the teams. I usually try for as much diversity as possible, but I don't want to use a lot of class time doing this, and I'm just probably going to make a stab, and it may work. I may stack one team with great quantitative analysts and stack another team with people that are really good at staying on task. These applications are timed. I'm going to have 3 teams. The third team, maybe I'll put all the people that are just good at getting everybody to get along. So if I blow it, we'll live with it. It's 7 weeks, and I'm not going to be adjusting teams. We're all in the workplace, and sometimes you just end up on a project with somebody you don't particularly care for, but you make it work anyway. That's what professionalism is all about. Anyway, we'll figure out together how this is going to work for our particular group. But it's time flies. It's just really a fun way to be a student. It's a fun way to teach. It's a little bit harder to teach this way, but I think the benefits in the form of student learning just are well justify it.